I was listening to the radio the other day, Radio 4, and there was a news item about this woman who'd been imprisoned in what they described as one of a network of secret prison camps in North Korea. I can't remember her name, but she was imprisoned because her grandfather had done something which the regime didn't like, and because she was his granddaughter, she was guilty by association. So she was banged up at the age of 13, and she'd been inside for 25 years. And it sounded horrendous, just absolutely appalling, very bad conditions, on the point of starvation the whole time. I think it was like 1 cup of corn that they got to eat per day, that was their ration. Just awful conditions, full stop. But what really amazed me about that story was that while she was in the camp, she got married and she'd had 2 children. I mean, it was part of another horrendous story, of course. Her husband was killed in a mining accident because he was taken out to the mines along with a lot of the men, and there was a fall and he was killed. And then both of her children were killed. She was out working, and the hut that her children were in while she was away was flooded while she was out. And she came back from work and it was just bulldozers just flattening it, so she never found the bodies or anything. Just a horrendous story, absolutely horrendous. But I couldn't help thinking, it's going to sound really callous, but I couldn't help thinking whilst I was listening to this, what the hell are you doing having children in that environment? I mean, really, what were you thinking? I mean, maybe, okay, people make mistakes. I don't know what age she was when she had these kids. So maybe there was a mistake, somehow. But twice? I don't know how you do that. I just couldn't do it. I don't know. I'm saying I couldn't do it, of course. I guess she was there, if she was there at the age of 13. I guess it would just be normal, but it was weird. I have to say it was really weird. And it jived with a couple of other things I've been watching. There was a thing on the Community Channel TV show about dengue fever in Jakarta in Indonesia, and how people were dealing with it, how people with these foggers were going around fogging particular neighbourhoods to kill the mosquitoes, and how there was not exactly vigilante groups, but groups of kind of neighbourhood watch groups forming that would go around people's houses to check to make sure that any open water they had didn't have mosquito larvae growing in them. And if they spotted any, then they would call the foggers up and spray this, some kind of DDT, I guess, to kill the mosquitoes. And dengue fever was just knocking out loads and loads of people, and particularly children, of course. And it was horrendous, to see these little people, these little babies and small children just completely out of it with this horrible fever, which is incurable, no cure for it. But again, I'm thinking, what are you doing? What are you doing? Stop it. I don't know, it's so weird, isn't it? And then last night on the Eden channel, which is a really great natural history channel in the UK, there was a programme about, what was this about? About Niger, sub-Saharan Africa, African state Niger, which is twice the size of France and has only 4,000 kilometres of paved roads, so it's a really rural backwater. Average family size, 7 children. 130 out of 1,000 die, compared to something like 3 in Europe. High birth rate, high death rate, massive turnover, huge problems with starvation and disease, just taking people out left, right and centre. I don't know, it's again, I guess from my position I'm just thinking, why are you doing that? Look at what's happening around you. It's horrendous, isn't it, really? I mean, it seems to me that we're I don't know. I was watching this other radio show last week. Sorry, this is going to sound very patchy, isn't it? It was a radio show about Malthusianism. And Stephen Jones, who's a biologist, was on there, and he was talking about how we're in the 3rd stage of death right now. 3rd stage of death, he says, in the West. And in the animal kingdom and in human history, the primary cause of death was what he called disaster. A monsoon would get you, or a flood, or a drought would, you'd starve to death, or there'd be, something horrible, a predator would get you. It was disastrous. And that's what most animals live in now. And then he says, because of the growth of population, particularly human populations, growth of things like availability of travel, growth of the kind of symbiotic relationships we have with lots of animals these days, that up until relatively recently the primary cause of death was disease, particularly disease in urban environments and closely knit communities. With things like the 13th century Black Death in Europe, which wiped out like 50% of the population, but other diseases as well. So the second age of death, he says, was disease, disaster first. Then it was disease that took most people out. That's because of the way that humans have come on. And now he says, and it's really only second part of the 20th century that this has kicked in, now disease doesn't take most people out, most people in the West, it's decay. And the third age of death is one where we die by decay. Very few of us die by disease, very few of us die because of drought or natural disaster, and very few of us become prey to predator animals. We die because our bodies run out, our hearts fail on us, our livers and kidneys fail on us, our bones crumble by osteoporosis, we fall to the ground and get pneumonia and die. These are the things that take us out now in the West. Which isn't a very salubrious, it's a great picture, it's pretty unpleasant. But that isn't in the West. Other parts of the world it is still disease for the most part and disaster. And in those places I mentioned, in Niger, it's mostly disease and disaster. And I guess in parts of Jakarta, it was mostly disease and disaster that was taking people out. And I guess in this network of secret prison camps in North Korea, it was mostly disease and disaster that take people out. It's those things that are taking people out, it seems to me. Life asserts itself in a different way, doesn't it? When it's decay that takes you out, you go for life extension, which is what we do in the West. We increase the total amount of life, whatever the hell that is, in the world by staying alive for longer. In other parts of the world, they don't have the luxury of decay. So you have to go for numbers, maintain the amount of life and develop the amount of life by just having more of it. And just suffer the fact that you're going to lose a few. That's what it means, doesn't it? Living up to nature, that's what it means. It means massive infant mortality. That's what it means. It means people watching their children die, or coming back from a day at work and watching bulldozers plough over the place that your children were supposed to be playing. And that's the natural order.